He called it love, but to me, it was a death sentence that dragged on for 7 agonizing years. Can you imagine it? A cozy family dinner, a stepfather with a gentle smile spreading his arms wide. Come, give Daddy a kiss. My mother saw a portrait of happiness, but I saw hell. Because hidden deep within that man's pockets were razor blades, rusty nails, and jagged shards of glass meticulously arranged to pierce my flesh every time I sat on his lap. I gritted my teeth and endured, letting my blood soak through my floral dresses in desperate silence. Until that fateful night in 1968, the night the weak little Margaret died, replaced by a girl who dared to grab a heavy hammer to shatter the bones of that demon in human skin. Hello, my dears. I am Margaret, and today's story is not for the faint of heart. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they shake your beliefs to the core. There are stories that, no matter how painful, must be told. My dears, I'm going to take you now to my childhood back in Frederick, a very pretty town in the countryside of Maryland. My dad's name was Timothy Miller, a hard-working man who took care of a small property with some cattle and some oak trees. My dad's name was Timothy Miller, a hard-working man who took care of a small property with some cattle and some oak trees. My mom, Dorothy, was a sweet, short woman who always lived with a smile on her face and the smell of lavender soap on her hands. There were 4 of us siblings. There was me, the youngest, my brother Gary, 3 years older, my sister Patricia, 5 years older, and the oldest, Jason, who was 9 years my senior. Our house was made of wood siding, painted white with blue shutters. It had 3 bedrooms, one where my parents slept, another where we 4 slept together, me and Patricia in one bed, the boys in another, and the living room, which was also the kitchen. The yard was big, with an apple tree that gave ample shade, a maple tree, and some chickens that my mom raised. My dad, Timothy, was a quiet man. He worked a lot and always came home tired, but he never failed to give a kiss on the forehead to each one of us before dinner. He had big, calloused hands that smelled of leather and work sweat. Every morning, before the rooster crowed, he was already up, drinking his black coffee and going out to the fields. My mom, Dorothy, would get up with him, prepare his biscuits with jam for him to take, and she always stayed at the front window, waving goodbye until he disappeared down the dirt road. The routine back home was very orderly, like a clock. I would wake up with the noise of the chickens and the smell of the coffee my mom made on a wood-burning stove. After breakfast, coffee with milk, grilled cheese sandwiches, or sometimes a piece of cornbread, I would help my mom sweep the porch and feed the animals. Patricia was in charge of washing the breakfast dishes and making the beds, while the boys went to help my dad when they didn't have classes. Oh, my children, how I liked games. With the girls from the neighborhood, we played house under the apple tree, making mud pies out of dirt and leaves. We invented pots with old cans my mom gave us, and made pretend food with sand and flower petals. Audrey, daughter of Mr. Smith from the store, was my best friend. She had blonde curls that bounced when she ran, and she always invented the funniest games. When it rained, which happened often in Maryland, we stayed on the porch watching the water fall and listening to the noise on the leaves of the oak tree. My mom would sit with us and tell us ghost stories about Bigfoot, about the headless horseman. I was fascinated by those stories, imagining the characters running through the fields. At school, which was on the other side of the town square, I was a diligent student. The teacher, Mrs. Susan, a thin lady who always wore a navy blue dress and a bun in her hair, always praised me because I knew how to read well and do math without making mistakes. I liked English a lot, writing pretty words in my notebook with careful handwriting. But when I was about 6 years old, something happened that changed our whole family. My dad, Timothy, had a heart problem. A heart attack, as they said back then. It was a Saturday morning. He was milking the cow when suddenly he fell to the ground with his hand on his chest, moaning quietly. My mom ran out screaming, asking for help. The neighbors came. They rushed him to the hospital in Frederick. But when they got there, he had already gone to be with God. I remember like it was today, the day of the funeral. My mom dressed in black, crying softly, holding my small hand, the cemetery full of people from the whole town, because my dad was very loved. I didn't understand very well what was happening, I only knew that Daddy wasn't going to come home anymore, wasn't going to give me a goodnight kiss anymore, wasn't going to arrive tired from work asking Mom to heat up dinner. After my dad died, our life got very difficult. My mom didn't know how we were going to be able to live without his money. The property he took care of belonged to a landowner in the region, so we no longer had the right to stay there. Jason, who was already 15, tried to get a job, but it was hard for such a young boy. That was when my mom met Frank. He appeared in our lives about 6 months after Dad's death. He was a tall, strong man with a graying mustache who worked making furniture and fixing wooden things for the whole town. He always walked around with his pants pockets full of small tools, screwdrivers, pliers, pocket knives, and nails. When he walked, you could hear the little noise of metal clinking inside his pockets. Frank started visiting our house, always bringing something: a piece of roast beef, some candy for the kids, nice fabrics for my mom to make dresses. He spoke softly with her on the porch when he thought we weren't watching. My mom smiled in a way I hadn't seen since before Dad died. I was little, only 7 years old when they started dating, but something about that man gave me a cold feeling in my stomach. Maybe it was the way he looked at me when my mom wasn't looking, a look that seemed to be measuring something, calculating, but I was a child. I didn't know how to name that strange sensation that made me want to run and hide behind Mom's skirt. Children have an intuition that adults often lose, a gut feeling that warns them when a predator is near. Margaret could sense the darkness hiding behind Frank's smile, but she had no idea just how sharp his cruelty would truly be. What happens next will break your heart, but don't look away, because her strength is coming. My dear, it was in January of 1961, when I was 8 years old, that my mom and Frank got married. I remember the day like it was yesterday. My mom wore a light blue dress that she had sewn herself with a little white flower in her hair. Frank was in a dark suit, with that mustache well-combed and a smile that showed all his teeth. The ceremony was simple, at the Methodist Church in Frederick, with few guests, some neighbors, my Uncle George, Mom's brother, and us 4 kids. After the wedding, Frank moved into our house. He brought some bundles of clothes, a big box full of carpentry tools, and some furniture he had made himself, a dark wooden round table and 2 new chairs for the living room. My mom was so happy with those nice pieces of furniture. She wiped them down with a cloth like they were treasures. From the first days, Frank established the rules of the house. He said that now we were a real family, and there had to be order and discipline. Meals had a fixed time, the house had to be always clean, and we kids couldn't make noise when he arrived tired from work. My mom agreed with everything, happy to have a man to take care of the family again. But it was after about 2 months that routine started, which terrified me every night. Frank instituted what he called family time. Every day after dinner, we gathered in the living room. He sat in his new chair. My mom stayed on the sofa, sewing or mending clothes, and we kids stayed playing quietly on the floor or doing homework. It seemed like a normal, happy family scene. Right, my children? But it wasn't. When it struck about 8 at night, Frank would clap his hands and say, "All right, kids, time to say goodnight to Daddy before going to sleep." My older brothers, Jason and Gary, were already too big for those things. So they just said, "Good night, Mr. Frank," from afar, and went to their room. Patricia, who was 13, gave him a quick peck on the forehead and ran off. But me, oh, my dears, with me it was different. "Come here, Maggie," he would say, opening his arms and patting his leg. "Come give a really nice hug to Daddy." The first few times I thought it was normal. After all, my real dad always gave me a goodnight kiss. But when I got close to Frank and he pulled me onto his lap, oh Jesus, how it hurt. Whenever I sat on his lap, I felt something hard, sharp, poking me in the leg or on my bottom. It was a sharp pain, as if something was piercing me through my clothes. I would move, trying to find a position that didn't hurt, but Frank would grab me tight by the shoulders and say, "Stay still, sweetie. Daddy just wants a loving hug." And the worst is that he did it smiling at my mom, who watched from her sewing and smiled back, thinking that was the sweetest thing in the world. "Look how sweet," she would say. "Frank is such a loving dad with Margaret." I tried to complain. I would say softly, "It hurts, Mr. Frank." But he would squeeze my shoulders harder and whisper in my ear, "Don't be rude, girl. Daddy is just showing you affection. Polite girls don't complain about affection." And out loud so my mom could hear, he would say, Maggie is just shy, right, my love? You don't have to be shy with Daddy, okay? My mom always agreed. That's right, Margaret. Don't be rude to your stepfather. He loves you as if you were his daughter. The pain was so much that I held back tears with all my might. Sometimes, when Frank pressed me against him in that hug, I felt something wet on my clothes, and later discovered I was bleeding. Small little holes in the skin of my thigh, red stains on my slip. I hid the dirty clothes at the bottom of the hamper for fear that my mom would ask what had happened. After a few weeks of this routine, I started to understand that there was something very wrong. One morning, when Frank left to work, I saw him organizing the tools on the living room table before putting them in the box. And that was when I realized he chose a specific tool and put it in the front pocket of his pants. Sometimes it was a closed pocket knife, but with the tip facing up. Sometimes it was a small screwdriver or a piece of pointed iron he used to punch holes in wood. I was just an 8-year-old girl, but I started to understand that Frank did that on purpose. He prepared his lap to hurt me. It wasn't a tool that had been forgotten in the pocket. It was a thought-out, planned trap. The devil never shows his true face right away, my dears. He was cunning. He knew exactly the angles my mother couldn't see. He knew just how to position those tools so that only I felt the pain, while to the world, it looked like a loving hug. Cruelty wrapped in a disguise of affection that is the most dangerous weapon of all. From then on, every time the hour to say goodnight to Daddy arrived, my heart would race. I looked at him sitting in the chair smiling, and I knew that beneath that smile was a blade waiting to pierce me. I tried to invent excuses. My stomach hurts. I'm sleepy. I just want to say goodnight from far away. But my mom always intervened. Don't be rude, Margaret. Go give your stepfather a hug. And Frank completed with that syrupy voice. Come, sweetie. Daddy worked all day thinking about his little girl's hug. What made me despair the most was seeing my mom so happy, so in love with that man. She smiled when he came home, cooked the food he liked most, fixed his clothes with such care. How could I tell her that the man she loved hurt me every night? How could an 8-year-old girl explain something so strange, so hard to believe? I tried once. One morning, when we were alone in the kitchen, I said softly, Mom, when I sit on Mr. Frank's lap, he has something in his pocket that hurts me. My mom stopped stirring the beans and looked at me with a face of not understanding. What do you mean, honey? He has something hard that pokes, that pierces my leg. She stayed thoughtful for a moment, then smiled. Oh, it must be his tools, right? You know how Frank works a lot. Sometimes he forgets little things in his pocket. Next time you tell him, he'll take them out. But I knew he didn't forget. I had seen him putting them there on purpose. When I tried to explain better, my mom shook her head. Margaret, child, you are inventing wickedness where there is none. Frank is a good man who takes care of us. Don't go inventing problems, okay? There is a specific kind of coldness that settles in when the one person supposed to protect you chooses to be blind. Margaret was now completely alone in her own home, trapped with a monster and his enabler. But isolation can sometimes forge the sharpest weapons, as you are about to see. My dears, I know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're angry at my mother, aren't you? You're asking, how could a mother be so blind? But listen to me, children. Loneliness is a terrifying thing. It puts a veil over your eyes. She didn't see a monster. She only saw a man who she thought was saving her life. Sometimes, people would rather believe a sweet lie than face a cruel truth. It was then I understood I was alone in this, that no one was going to believe an 8-year-old girl telling such a strange story, and that every night after dinner I was going to have to face that torture chair that Frank had turned his own lap into. The weeks passed, and the physical pain added to the fear. I couldn't play well during the day anymore. I lived thinking about the time he was going to come home. When I heard the little noise of the tools in his pocket approaching, my stomach turned. At school, the teacher, Mrs. Susan, noticed that I was quieter, more distracted, but when she asked if I was okay, I just nodded and said yes. My dears, the years that followed were the hardest of my life. From 1961 to 1968, from my 8 to my 15 years, I lived that nightmare every night. Frank perfected his cruelty in a way that to this day gives me chills to remember. He started to vary the tools he put in his pocket, as if he were testing which caused more pain. Some nights it was a thick nail with the point facing up. Other times it was an iron file with rough edges, or even small pieces of glass he wrapped in a thin rag. The glass was the worst of all. It cut the skin even through clothes, leaving little red lines on my legs that burned for days. As time went on, Frank got more confident, bolder. He prolonged those hugs that used to last a few seconds. Now he kept me on his lap for 5-10 minutes, pretending to be chatting with my mom about the workday, about the furniture he had made, about the neighbors, and me there trying not to move, feeling the pain grow every minute, sometimes biting my tongue until I drew blood so I wouldn't scream. "Look how Maggie has grown," he would tell my mom, pressing me harder against the sharp object. "She's almost a young lady, right, Dorothy? But she's still Daddy's little girl, right, sweetie?" And he rocked gently in his lap, making the tool press even more against my skin. My mom smiled, thinking that was the height of affection. "It's true, she's growing so fast, but she'll always be our baby, right, Margaret?" I had to nod. I had to smile. I had to pretend I liked it while I felt my clothes getting wet with my own blood. Frank also started making strange comments during those moments. He whispered in my ear things like, "Daddy needs to teach the daughter discipline. No, obedient girls don't complain about anything. Oh, if you are a good girl and stay still, Daddy will be more loving." And the word loving in his mouth always came accompanied by a stronger pressure of the tool against me. Sometimes, when the object in his pocket managed to hurt me deeper, I couldn't hold back a quiet little whimper of pain. In those moments, Frank quickly said out loud for my mom to hear, "Maggie is falling asleep, right, sweetie? Daddy knows when his daughter is tired." And my mom, without looking up from her sewing, responded, "Yes, she works so hard at school, poor thing. Take her to her room, Frank." But he never took me to the room immediately. First, he stayed a few more minutes torturing me, whispering, "See, not even your own mom cares if you're suffering. Only Daddy knows how to take care of you well." The isolation I felt was terrible. My children. My older brothers already had their own worries. Jason, who was already in his early 20s, had gotten a job on a ranch and was hardly home. Gary, around 16, spent all day helping Frank in the carpentry shop and came home dead tired. Patricia, who was 18, was dating a boy from town and thinking about getting married. No one paid attention to the quiet girl I had become. At school, my grades started to drop because I couldn't concentrate. I lived thinking about the time to go home, about dinner time, about the time to say goodnight to Daddy. Mrs. Susan even asked me a few times if I was okay, if there was any problem at home. But how could I explain something so strange, so impossible to believe? The marks on my body accumulated over the years. Small scars on my thigh, little scratches on my legs, bruises I hid with long skirts. My mom never asked about those marks, maybe because I always managed to hide them well, or maybe because she was so happy with her new life that she didn't want to see anything that could disturb her. Frank also started giving me special gifts. Sometimes, after a night when he had hurt me more than normal, he would appear the next day with a candy, a fruit, or a bow for my hair. "So Daddy can show her how much he loves his little daughter," he said in front of my mom. Polite girls deserve a prize. Those gifts made me feel even worse, because they seemed like payment for my silence, a compensation for the pain he caused me. And the worst is that my mom melted. "Look what a loving stepfather you have, Margaret. Thank your Frank properly." When I turned 12 inches, 1,965, I thought maybe things were going to change. After all, I was bigger now. I was already becoming a young lady. But Frank only intensified the torture. On the night of my birthday, after we ate the cake my mom had made, he called me to his lap and whispered, "Now that you turned 12, Daddy is going to teach you some new lessons." That night he had put 2 nails in his pocket, one on each side of the leg, so that when I sat down I was squeezed between them. The pain was so much that I fainted in his lap. When I woke up, I was in my room with my mom wiping cold water on my forehead. "Poor thing. She must have eaten too much cake," she said. Frank was at the door of the room with a little smile at the corner of his mouth and said, "Yes, children don't know how to control themselves, but it was good that she learned." My mom thought he was talking about eating too much candy. I knew he was talking about learning to endure pain. The years of 1966 and 1967 passed in that same cruel routine. I got thinner, quieter, more tormented. At school, the other girls played and laughed, and I stayed in a corner, always worried about the time to return home. Some tried to approach, invite me to play, but I couldn't have fun knowing what awaited me. Every night, I started to build a wall inside my heart, my dears. A thick, cold wall made of silence. I learned to disconnect from my own body. When I sat on that chair, I closed my eyes and imagined I was a bird flying high above the oak trees, far away from that living room, far away from the pain. I stopped being Margaret, the happy girl who made mud pies. I became a ghost in my own house. I watched my mother humming while she cooked, and I wondered, does she really not see? Or is her happiness more important than my pain? That question hurt more than any tool in Frank's pocket. It was a silent poison that made me feel unworthy of love, unworthy of being saved. Frank noticed my isolation and used it to his favor. See, Dorothy? Maggie doesn't have little friends because she is special. She prefers to stay home with the family. That's why Daddy loves her so much. And my mom nodded. It's true. She's always been more of a homebody. Homebody, nothing. I was a prisoner of my own fear. In 1967, when I was 14, I tried once more to talk to my mom. This time I was more direct. Mom, I don't want to say goodnight to Mr. Frank anymore. Can it just be from far away? She stopped peeling the potatoes and looked at me seriously. Margaret, what story is this? You are acting very strange lately. Frank is your stepfather. He loves you like a daughter, and you come with these quirks. That is lack of gratitude. I still tried, but Mom, I don't like it when he, what, girl? When he squeezes me too tight. My mom sighed impatiently. Margaret, for the love of God, the man works all day to support this family. He comes home wanting affection from his daughter, and you come with nonsense. I don't want to hear that foolishness anymore, you hear? And I don't want you to be rude to your stepfather. It was then that I understood definitely that I was completely alone, that I could scream, I could cry, I could bleed, but no one was going to save me from that situation. My own mom had chosen his side. There is a kind of coldness that is sharper than any winter frost, and that is when you realize you are completely alone inside your own home. In that moment, my heart turned to ice. I realized that no fairy godmother was coming to save me. If I wanted to survive, I had to become my own warrior. And that was how I reached 15 years old in 1968, completely destroyed inside, but also with a rage growing in my chest, a rage that was going to explode in a way I didn't even imagine. My dears, we arrive now at the most difficult moment of my story, but also the most important. It was October of 1968. I had just turned 15 a few days ago, and something inside me was different. 7 years of torture had transformed me into a destroyed girl, but they had also planted a seed of hatred that was growing like a weed in my chest. At that time, I was already a young lady. My body had changed, and Frank had noticed. His comments during the hugs got nastier, more invasive. He whispered things like, "Look how my girl is becoming a young lady. Daddy is going to have to teach you some new lessons now." And the way he looked at me when my mom wasn't looking had also changed. It was a longer, more calculating look that made me feel naked even though I was dressed. The night of the 15th of October, 1968, a date I will never forget. Something happened that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Frank had drunk some whiskey with some friends during the afternoon, celebrating I don't know what, and arrived home more talkative, looser than normal. During dinner, he was telling some funny stories, making my mom laugh, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, he would forget the disgusting routine of that night. But he didn't forget. When it struck 8, he clapped as always. All right, family, time for Maggie to say goodnight to Daddy. Only this time, when I approached with that squeezing in my heart as always, he pulled me with more force than normal. And when I sat on his lap, the pain was different. It wasn't just a pointed tool. As always, it was as if he had put several sharp things in his pocket, forming a row of needles. The pain was so intense that I couldn't hold back a quiet little scream. Frank squeezed me tighter and whispered in my ear with that whiskey breath. "Shut up, girl. Daddy put a special little surprise today in honor of your birthday. You are already a young lady. You have to learn to endure a woman's pain. I tried to get up, but he grabbed me by the wrists, forcing me to stay seated in that torture. And it was then that he said the words that changed everything. You know, Dorothy? He told my mom, still holding me tight. Maggie is getting so pretty that any day now she's going to get a boyfriend. But as long as she lives in our house, it is Daddy who rules, right? Daddy, who decides what is best for her. The tone of possession in his voice, the way he said, "It is Daddy who rules," while he hurt me, made me understand something terrible that was never going to end. Even if I grew up, even if I became an adult while I lived in that house, Frank was going to keep torturing me, and maybe it was even going to get worse. That night, when I finally could go to my room, I cried like I had never cried. It wasn't just crying from physical pain, it was pure desperation. I felt like I was sinking into a dark hole, and that no one was going to get me out of there. I looked at myself in the small mirror on the wall of the room and didn't recognize the girl looking back. It was a skinny, tormented creature with deep circles under her eyes and an empty look. It was that night that I thought for the first time about killing myself. The idea came as a strange relief. If I didn't exist anymore, the pain would stop. If I disappeared, Frank couldn't hurt me anymore. I stayed lying in bed for hours imagining ways to do it, and the more I thought, the more the idea seemed to make sense. But then I remembered my real dad, Timothy. I remembered how he always said I was strong, that I was special, that I was going to grow up and be a brave woman, and something inside me screamed, "No! You aren't going to let that bastard win. You aren't going to die because of him." The next morning, when I woke up, I had a strange determination in my chest. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to endure even one more night of that. I watched Frank during breakfast. I saw him organizing his tools on the table before going to work, and for the first time, instead of fear, I felt a cold and calculating rage. He was just a man, a cowardly man who tortured a girl, and I was no longer a helpless child. I was a 5-year-old young lady who had endured 7 years of hell and was still standing. I spent the whole day thinking, planning. When Frank returned from work that afternoon, I was different, more alert, more attentive. I watched his every move, every gesture, every word. During dinner, when he recounted the workday, I was studying him as if he were prey. "Maggie, you are very quiet today," my mom commented. "Do you feel okay?" "Yes, Mom," I answered. But my voice came out different, firmer, more decided. Frank looked at me with that cruel little smile and said, "She must be thinking about Daddy's hug tonight, right, daughter?" For years that phrase made me tremble with fear. But that night when he said that, I looked directly into his eyes and answered, "Yes, Mr. Frank, I am thinking about that too." The tone of my voice must have been strange because he frowned for a second, but then smiled again and said, "Ah, good. Daddy is thinking too." After dinner, when the fateful hour arrived, I saw Frank going to the bathroom before sitting in his chair. It was always like that. He went to the bathroom to adjust the tools in his pocket, to prepare his torture trap. That night, when he came out of the bathroom with that diabolical little smile, I knew he had prepared something even worse than the day before. He sat in the chair, adjusted his legs, and clapped. "Come, Maggie, Daddy is waiting for you." My mom was sewing on the sofa, concentrated on a hem, having no idea what was going to happen. I got up slowly. I felt my legs shaking, not from fear, but from a strange, powerful energy. I walked toward him, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel like running. When I was almost getting close to his chair, something happened that changed everything. Frank had drunk again that afternoon and felt too confident. He said out loud for my mom to hear, "Dorothy, look, I'm going to teach our Maggie how to sit properly on Daddy's lap. She's already becoming a young lady. She needs to learn to behave like a woman." And then he did something he had never done before. He showed my mom what was in his pocket. He pulled out a piece of pointed iron, somewhat rusty, and said, "Oh, I left this here by mistake. Lucky our girl is polite and never complains about anything, right?" My mom looked, gave a little laugh, and said, "Oh, Frank, you are so absent-minded. Put that away. You're going to hurt the girl." "Oh, it doesn't hurt her," he answered, putting it back in his pocket with a diabolical smile. "Our Maggie is already used to it, right, daughter? I know this part sounds impossible to believe, doesn't it? How could my mother laugh when looking right at that sharp piece of iron? But my dears, that is the power of denial. Her mind was so desperate to ignore the truth that she looked at a weapon and saw a harmless mistake. It wasn't innocence. It was a sickness of the soul, a desperate escape from reality. It was in that moment that something inside me exploded. 7 years of silence, 7 years of pain, 7 years watching my mom defend him without knowing the truth. She had just seen the proof of his cruelty and still treated it as if it were an accident. I looked around the room and saw leaning against the wall the toolbox that Frank had left open after work. And there, gleaming in the weak light of the lamp, was a big, heavy hammer with a wooden handle. In that fraction of a second, everything became clear in my mind. 7 years of hell were going to end that night one way or another. My dears, what happened in those next minutes changed my life forever. While Frank was sitting in his chair, adjusting his posture and waiting for me with that diabolical smile, I walked to the toolbox. My mom continued sewing, oblivious to everything. And Frank was so confident, so sure that I was going to be the same submissive girl as always, that he didn't even pay attention to what I was doing. "Come on, Maggie," he said, patting his leg, where I knew another pain trap was hidden. "Daddy doesn't have all night. Tomorrow he has to get up early to work." I grabbed the hammer with both hands. It was heavier than I imagined, with the wooden handle rough and full of splinters, and the iron head cold, reflecting the weak light of the lamp. I felt the weight, the solidity, the power that tool represented. For the first time in 7 years, I had in my hands something that could cause pain instead of receiving it. Frank was so blinded by his arrogance that he didn't see the shift in the atmosphere. He didn't see that the power in the room had just changed hands. The silence is about to be shattered by 7 years of suppressed rage. You are going to want to hear exactly how Margaret reclaims her freedom. Can you imagine what that felt like? That hammer was heavy, but in my hands at that moment, it felt as light as a feather. Because it wasn't just wood and iron, it was freedom. In that split second, the terrified little Margaret died, and all that was left was a blazing fire of rage that burned away every ounce of fear. "I'm coming, Mr. Frank," I answered, hiding the hammer behind my back. My voice came out strangely calm, almost sweet, as if I were the same obedient girl as always. "I'm just fixing something here first," he laughed, a low and cruel laugh that I had heard 1,000 times before. "What is that, girl? Don't be shy with Daddy. You're already a young lady. You don't have to have that nonsense anymore. Come here, and he'll teach you how to sit properly on his lap." Those words, "You're already a young lady," made me remember all the disgusting comments he had made in the last weeks. How he looked at my body that was changing. How he whispered in my ear about new lessons he was going to teach me. I felt the rage rise up my throat like bitter bile. I walked toward him slowly, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. I looked at my mother, her head bent over her sewing, blind to the monster sitting 5 feet away. I looked at Frank, his eyes gleaming with that sick anticipation, and suddenly, the fear vanished. It was replaced by a cold, crystal-clear clarity. I realized that no angel was coming to save me, no neighbor, no teacher, and certainly not my mother. If I wanted to survive, I had to be my own savior. The hammer in my hand didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like an extension of my arm, an instrument of justice. I wasn't a scared little girl anymore. I was a warrior preparing for her first and last battle. Every step I took toward that chair was a step toward my freedom. Frank watched me approach with those small and cruel eyes, already savoring in anticipation the pain he was going to cause me. He had the habit of adjusting his body position when I approached, positioning the tool in a way that would hurt me even more, and that was exactly what he did. He moved in the chair, adjusted his legs, prepared his diabolical trap. "Ready," he said, opening his arms, with that fake smile stamped on his face. "Now sit here on Daddy's lap, who is going to give you a really tight hug. But today, it's going to be special, okay? Daddy prepared a surprise to celebrate that you are already a young lady." And it was in that moment, my children, that 7 years of silence, 7 years of pain, 7 years of humiliation, 7 years of sleepless nights with fear, 7 years of clothes stained with blood, 7 years of scars on the soul and on the body, exploded inside me like a volcano that had been dormant too long. Instead of sitting on his lap, I swung my body with all the force I had accumulated in those 15 years of life and gave him a brutal hammer blow, exactly where I knew the pointed iron was, in the middle of his right thigh. I put into that blow all the pain I had felt, all the rage I had swallowed, all the hatred that had grown in my chest during those years of hell. The noise was terrible and satisfying at the same time. The metallic sound of the hammer crushing the tool against his leg bone, mixed with the dry snap that I knew was the bone breaking, followed by a scream that must have woken the entire neighborhood and made the dogs on the whole street bark in fright. Ah! Frank squealed like a pig being slaughtered, writhing in the chair and almost falling to the floor. "My God, my leg! Help, Dorothy, help!" Blood started to trickle from under his pants, forming a red puddle on the dirt floor. He tried to grab his leg with both hands, but the pain was so much he couldn't even touch the spot. My mom dropped the sewing on the floor and jumped from the sofa as if she had been given an electric shock, with eyes wide with terror. "Margaret, what did you do, child? Did you go crazy? Drop that hammer." But I didn't drop it. I grabbed it even tighter with both hands and screamed back with a voice that not even I knew existed inside me. "Look at his pocket, Mom. Look at what he uses to hurt me every night. Go and look." Frank writhed in the chair, moaning like a wounded animal, but managed to speak between screams of pain. The girl went crazy. Dorothy. She attacked me out of nowhere. "Call someone. Call the doctor. I think she broke my bone." Out of nowhere, I screamed again, raising the hammer and threatening to strike another blow. 7 years, Mom, 7 years. This bastard tortures me every single night. Look at his pocket. Go and look now. My mom was in total panic, running from one side of the room to the other, not knowing if she should help Frank or try to understand what I was screaming. "Margaret, for the love of God, drop that hammer. You hurt your stepfather. What got into you, child?" "I'm not dropping anything," I roared with a force that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. "And if he tries to get up from that chair, I'll break his other leg too, and then his arms." Frank looked at me with a terror I had never ever seen in his eyes. It was the first time in my life that he was afraid of me. The first time the power was on my side. And, my God, how good it felt, Dorothy moaned with a choked voice of pain. "Call someone, please. I think the girl broke my bone. It really hurts a lot. I can't move my leg." "Mom!" I screamed, pointing the hammer at his pants pocket. "Go and take out what he has in his pocket. Go now. I want you to see with your own eyes the tool he uses to cut me." Trembling from head to toe, my mom started to approach Frank, who tried to stop her with his free hand. "No, Dorothy, leave that for later. First take me to the hospital. I could die if I lose a lot of blood." "No." I advanced toward him with the hammer raised. "She is going to look now. Now. 7 years I endured your cursed tools cutting me, piercing me, making me bleed. Now it's your turn to bleed, you bastard." It was then that Frank, maybe because of the unbearable pain, maybe because of the desperation of seeing he had completely lost control of the situation, committed the final mistake of his life. He shouted, "Enough of this, you ungrateful brat. After everything I did for you, I took you out of misery. I maintained this house, took care of all of you. And this is how you thank me? Everything you did for us?" The rage that came out of my voice in that moment must have cracked the walls of the house and scared even the angels in heaven. "You call torture a favor? You call 7 years of suffering care?" My mom finally put her trembling hand in his pants pocket. When she pulled out that piece of rusty iron, long, pointed like a spear, stained with dried blood, my blood, her face changed completely. She went white as a washed sheet and started to shake so much she almost dropped the tool. Frank whispered, looking at the iron and then at it, then at the blood on the floor, then at me. "What is this? Why do you have this in your pocket?" He still tried to lie, even with a broken leg, even with the proof in her hand. "Ah, that is just a work tool I forgot. You know how distracted I am with tools. Always forget something in the pocket. Distracted?" I screamed, and my voice resonated through the whole house. "Tell her the truth. Tell her how you put this on purpose to hurt me. Tell her how you felt pleasure seeing me bleed on your lap." And it was then that Frank, maybe because the pain in his leg was unbearable, maybe because he knew he had been discovered and there was no way to lie anymore, made the confession I waited for 7 long and painful years. Okay. I did it on purpose. Yes, The girl was very spoiled, very back-talking. She needed to learn discipline, needed to know who ruled in this house. And you never cared about anything, Dorothy, always defending her, thinking I was a saint. You never paid attention to what happened in your own house. The silence that fell in the room after those words was deafening. Only the sound of his heavy breathing was heard, the drops of blood falling to the floor, and the wind rocking the branches outside. My mom stood like a statue, holding that piece of iron as if it were the proof of all the mistakes of her life. And I finally, for the first time in 7 years, felt free. 7 years, Mom, I said, quieter now, but still holding the hammer very firm. 7 years he hurt me every night, and I tried to tell you. Remember when I said it hurt? Remember when I asked you not to sit me on his lap anymore? You said I was rude, that I was inventing wickedness where there wasn't any. My mom dropped to her knees, not beside her husband, but on the floor, clutching that bloody piece of iron to her chest. She let out a wail, a sound of pure agony that I will never forget. It wasn't just crying. It was the sound of a woman whose entire world had just shattered. She looked at Frank with horror. Then she looked at me, really looked at me and saw the scars, the thinness, the haunted eyes she had ignored for 7 years. Oh God, what have I done? She screamed, rocking back and forth. I traded my daughter's soul for a man. I let the wolf into the sheepfold. She crawled toward me, ignoring Frank's pleas. She didn't dare touch me. She just bowed her head at my feet. You didn't want to know, I whispered, and seeing her broken like that gave me no pleasure, only a deep, aching sadness. You loved your blindfold more than you loved me. Every time I tried to talk, you told me to shut up. Every time I cried, you said it was a tantrum. You chose him, Mom. You always chose him instead of your own daughter. Frank kept moaning in the chair, trying to stop the blood running from the broken leg, making a mess on the floor. Dorothy, for the love of God, take me to the hospital. I could die here. It hurts too much. My mom looked at him, then at me, then at the bloody iron in her hands, and for the first time in my life, for the first time in 15 years, I saw her choose my side. No. First, you are going to explain, well, what you did to my daughter. Every night, every wound, every tear you caused. I want to know everything. Do you hear? Everything. I have nothing else to explain, he murmured, but he no longer had that arrogance from before. The voice came out weak, defeated. Just take me to the doctor, please. It was then that I said the words I kept stuck in my throat for years. If you don't tell her everything now, Mr. Frank, I'm going to break your other leg too, and then your arms, and then I'm going to continue until you feel every stitch of pain, every drop of blood, every tear I shed in these 7 years of hell. The pure fear in his eyes gave me a satisfaction I never imagined could exist. That man who had terrified me for so long, who had transformed my childhood into a nightmare, was terrified of a 5-year-old girl holding a hammer. And then, between moans of pain and tears of dread, Frank started to tell everything. Every tool he chose, specifically to hurt me. Every night he had fun seeing my suffering. Every time he felt sadistic pleasure with my pain. Every drop of blood he made run from my body. Every scar he left on my soul. My mom cried while she listened to every word, holding that piece of iron as if it were the material proof of her failure as a mother. When he finished confessing all his crimes, the house fell silent again. Only the sound of the rain that had started to fall outside was heard, drumming on the roof, as if the sky itself was crying, and his quiet moans. Now, I said, still holding the hammer like it was a royal scepter, you are leaving this house this very night and never coming back. And if I find out you laid a finger on a girl, if I find out you did to any girl what you did to me, I will come find you and finish what I started today. That was the last night Frank slept in our house, and the first night in 7 years I slept in peace, knowing I was never again going to have to sit in that chair. My dears, look where life brought me after all that. Today, at 72 years old, here in Baltimore, Maryland, I have a life I never imagined would be possible. That terrible night of October 1968, when I broke that cursed man's leg and he left our house never to return, I had no idea I was opening the door to a whole life of peace and happiness. After Frank left, my mom herself helped him leave. She said if he tried to return, she herself was going to call the police. Our life changed completely. The first months were difficult. I won't lie to you. My mom cried a lot, blaming herself for not noticing what was happening. She always repeated, "How was I so blind, Margaret? How can a mother be so blind?" But I had already forgiven her, because when the truth appeared, she chose to stay on my side, and that meant the world to me. In 1970, when I was 17, I met the man of my life, Robert Johnson. Oh, my children, what a handsome and hard-working boy. He was 3 years older than me, son of a family of farmers from a neighboring town, and had come to Frederick to work on a corn farm. Black hair, light eyes, always with a smile on his face and a kind word for everyone. The first time Robert saw me, I was at the town market buying thread for my mom, who had taught me to sew to help with the household support. He approached all shy and said, "Miss, do you know where Mr. George's house is, the one who sells tools?" When I answered him, he stayed looking at me in such a sweet, respectful way that my heart raced. But it wasn't from fear like before. It was purely from joy. We dated for 3 years, always with much respect, much good conversation. Robert knew I had gone through difficult things in childhood. I told him about Frank, of course, and he never pressured me, never rushed me. It takes a special kind of patience to rebuild a trust that has been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Robert showed Margaret that a man's hands could be used to build and caress, not just to destroy. Listen to how this love story heals the wounds of the past, because everyone deserves a happy ending. But the scars weren't just on my skin, my dears. In the beginning, I flinched every time Robert raised his hand, even if it was just to scratch his head. I froze when he tried to hug me. I was terrified that beneath his kindness lay another monster waiting to come out. But Robert, oh, he was an angel. He noticed my fear and he didn't get angry. He simply put his hands in his pockets to show me he held no weapons. He sat on the floor while I sat on the chair, so I would always be higher than him, so I would feel in control. He taught my heart that a man's hands could be used to build and to caress, not just to destroy. He didn't just love me. He rebuilt my trust, brick by brick, with infinite patience. "Margaret," he would say, "you set the pace of our courtship. I will wait for you as long as necessary for you to feel safe with me. Please, remember this, my children. True love never hurts you, not your body, and certainly not your soul. If someone says they love you but makes you flinch in fear, that is not love, that is a prison." Robert taught me that a man's hands are made to protect and build, never to destroy. And look, my dears, how different it is when a real man loves you. He made me feel protected, respected, loved in a clean and beautiful way. We got married in March of 1973 inches, a beautiful ceremony at the Methodist Church in Frederick, the same one where my mom had married Frank years before. But this time it was different. It was true love. It was a good man who was entering my life. I wore the dress I sewed myself, white with lace, and a veil that had been my grandmother's. Robert was incredibly handsome, in the suit borrowed from his older brother, and when the minister asked if I accepted him as my husband, my voice came out firm and clear. "I do." Shortly after the wedding, Robert got a job at a transportation company here in Baltimore, Maryland. It was a good opportunity, and we decided to move here, start our new life in a bigger city. My mom was sad with the move, but understood it was for our own good. "Go, my daughter," she said the day of our departure. "Go be happy far from those ugly memories. You deserve all the happiness in the world." We arrived in Baltimore in April of 1973 with 2 suitcases of clothes and a lot of hope in our hearts. We rented a small house in the neighborhood near the inner harbor, close to the main park. It was 3 simple rooms, but it was ours. Robert worked as a driver, left early, and arrived at the end of the afternoon, always bringing some news from the street, always with a loving kiss for me. In 1975, God blessed me with the arrival of my first son, Tyler. Oh, my dears, what immense joy when I held that little boy in my arms. Robert cried along with me in the hospital, saying, "Look at our gift from God. Margaret, we are going to raise him with much love." And so, we raised him. Tyler grew up strong and healthy, an intelligent and obedient boy. 2 years later came my second blessing, Ashley. I gave her a beautiful name that I always loved. And in 1980, the youngest arrived, Mason, just like his dad in stubbornness and affection. Our little house was getting small with 3 kids, so Robert managed to buy a plot of land in the neighborhood where we live today, and little by little, we built our own house, brick by brick, with much sacrifice, but with much love. It was during the construction of the house that I started to dedicate myself more to quilting. I needed to help with expenses, so I started making trousseaux for brides, table sets, and baptism towels. The neighbors liked my work so much that soon I had orders until I couldn't do any more. And I discovered that quilting wasn't just a job, it was therapy for my soul. Every stitch I made was as if I were sewing my own healing, you know. Robert always supported me in everything. "You have a gift in your hands, woman," he would say, watching me work on the porch after the kids fell asleep. "You transform a simple fabric into a work of art." He installed a stronger light on the porch, just so I could quilt at night. He got a special table to keep my threads organized by color. He never complained when I stayed up late working. He never said I should stop doing this or that. The years passed so fast. My children grew up, studied, got married, gave me the most beautiful grandkids in the world. Tyler became a mechanic, has his own shop and 3 kids. Caleb, 15, Chloe, 12, and little Lily, who you already know, is 6. Ashley became a teacher, married a very good boy, and gave me 2 granddaughters, Zoe, 9, and Grace, 11. And my youngest, Mason, works at a hardware store. He has a small daughter, Maggie, yes. They named her after me in my honor, who is just 3 years old and is the cutest thing in this world. My dear Robert left us 5 years ago, in 2020. It was his heart, just like what happened to my dad when I was a child. But what a beautiful life we had together. 47 years of happy marriage, of companionship, of true love. He died sleeping without pain in our bed, holding my hand. The next day, I found a little note he had left in the drawer of the nightstand. "Margaret, my love, thank you for making me the happiest man in the world. Take good care of our children and grandkids. I love you forever." Today, I live here in this same house we built together in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Baltimore. It was here we moved when the kids grew up. It is a simple house, but cozy, with the porch where I spend my afternoons quilting, the little yard where I have my plants, and many, many beautiful memories. Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, who is married to Tyler, lives here with me since Robert died. She takes care of me with such affection, always leaves my coffee ready, makes those delicious meals I like. My grandkids are the joy of my life. Almost every day, at least one of them shows up here. Lily is the one who likes to stay with me the most, always wanting to learn to quilt, always asking questions about how life was before. Caleb, the oldest, helps me with heavy things, fixes whatever breaks in the house. The other granddaughters always come on the weekend, and we have a party in the kitchen making cakes and sweets. My routine today is quiet and blessed. I get up early, have my coffee with toast that Jennifer prepares, and go to the porch with my quilting. In the morning, the light is perfect for working, and the movement of the street keeps me company. After lunch, I take a little nap in my rocking chair, and in the afternoon return to quilting or receive visits from the grandkids. Sometimes, when I am here alone quilting, I remember that one 5-year-old girl who grabbed a hammer to defend her own life, and I feel so proud of her. I pride myself on having had courage, on not having let myself be broken, on having fought for my freedom. All the pains were worth it, because they brought me here, to this life full of love and peace. My dear children who are listening to me, after telling this whole story to you, my heart is full of many things I need to say. First, I want you to know that if I could share this pain so big, it was because it turned into strength, turned into courage, turned into the certainty that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to hurt a child. If there is someone there watching this video who is going through something similar, or if you know a child who is being hurt by someone in the family, please do not stay silent like I stayed for 7 years. Seek the authorities in your region. Seek organizations that protect children. Talk to teachers, with trusted neighbors. In any country in the world, there are people ready to help. Silence only helps the one doing evil. Look, during all these years that passed since that night I grabbed the hammer, I learned some very important things about life. I learned that pain, even the most terrible, can transform into wisdom. I learned that when we face our fears head on, they lose power over us. I learned that even in the darkest moments of our life, there always exists a little spark of hope waiting to be lit. I learned that having courage doesn't mean not feeling fear. It means acting even if we feel fear. That night in October, I was terrified. But I did what I had to do. I learned that sometimes we need to break the things that break us literally to be able to free ourselves. I learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let rage poison the rest of our life. I learned that true love exists. Yes, my children. After so much pain, God put Robert in my path to show me that not all men are equal to that bastard. There are good men, men who protect, who love, who respect. I learned that real family is the one that stays on our side when the truth appears, like my mom did that night. And I learned mainly that our story doesn't have to be defined by the bad things that happened to us. I could have stayed trapped in that pain forever. I could have let those 7 years of suffering define the rest of my life, but I chose differently. I chose to build a new life, a loving family, a home full of peace. Today, when I look at my hands quilting, I remember they are the same hands that held that hammer. They are hands that knew violence, but chose to create beauty. They are hands that bled, but today only spread affection for my grandkids. That is what I want you to understand. We can choose what to do with our pain. My dear children, looking back at those 7 years of hell, I learned some very important things. I learned that having courage doesn't mean not feeling fear. It means acting even when you are terrified. I learned that true love exists because God sent Robert to show me that a man's hands are meant to protect, not to hurt. And I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let rage poison the rest of your life. If there is anyone watching this who is going through something similar, please, do not stay silent like I did. Seek authorities, tell a teacher, find a trusted neighbor. Silence only helps the abuser. Today, when I look at my hands quilting, I remember they are the same hands that held that hammer. They are hands that bled, but today they create beauty. And that brings me to my final message for you. You see, that hammer back then didn't just shatter Frank's leg, it shattered the fear inside me. It taught me that the only hero in your story is you. No matter what hardship you are facing, remember that you can build your own happiness as long as you dare to act. And now, I want to know who the real warriors are, those brave enough to listen to this truth until the end. Please, leave a comment down below with just one word: freedom. Write it in all caps, freedom, because that is the most precious thing I reclaimed at 15 years old. Leave that comment so we can spread this strength to those who are feeling powerless out there. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Have a peaceful night, my dears. Goodbye, my angels.